2, was usually more reliable for the pirate than for the sailor in the English Navy. The Navy embodied the most rigid of class structures, and offered little in the way of security. Pirates bought supplies and arms, sold ill-gotten gains from water jewels, and often retired to estates, or at least farms, bought with the proceeds of their life's work. To deal with conventional society, they had to have connections. To create such connections meant that they had to belong to a brotherhood. The brotherhood went much deeper than a small group banding together. As remnant Templars became organized in lodges, old ties were restored. Masonry, more or less underground until the early 18th century, provided lodging, employment, food, and even clothes to brothers. Masonry also provided connections to a network, underground and often above the law. When Freemasonry was finally acknowledged, a secret oath for a master mason acknowledged that masons were brothers to pirates and corsairs. Those who sailed under the skull and crossbones could rely on protection in the ports, and in the courts, where a secret handshake or coded phrase required fellow masons to come to the aid of their brethren. Fortunes built by pirates, and by those who outfitted them with supplies, and bought their goods survived the golden age of piracy. Dynasties created through underworld activity and membership in secret societies would pave the way to power that survives into modern times. Chapter 1 The New World Order October 13, 1307, would go down in history as the first unlucky Friday the 13th. On that day the Knights Templar, who had fought so valiantly for the cause of Christianity during the Crusades, were ordered arrested by the French king. Operating on orders that were sealed until the night before the arrest, the representatives of the French crown launched an early dawn raid on all the Templar properties in the realm of the king. Special focus was given to the center of the Templar organization, the Paris treasury. Within hours both knights and servants of the order were under arrest and in custody. Within days, interrogation under extreme torture began, and it soon elicited confessions of many of the depraved acts and practices of the order of warrior monks. The greatest order Europe had ever seen soon ceased to exist. When it was formed almost 200 years before, the Templars were a military force organized like a religious order. The creation of the Templars coincided with Saint Bernard taking control of the Cistercian order of monks in France. Bernard was instrumental in molding both organizations to carry out the mission he envisioned. The rules for his order of monks were adopted by the fighting monks, that would be called the Order of the Poor Knights of Christ and the Temple of Solomon. They would become known as the Knights Templar. Bernard's vision became reality. But he was not acting alone. Saint Bernard was a member of an elite class at a time in European history, when the feudal system ruled every facet of life. This handful of 12 the New World Order 13 wealthy families, mostly centered around the town of Champagne and its count, would be responsible for the Crusades, for the rapid growth of the Cistercian order, and for the power of the Knights Templar. There were 9 members of the original Knights Templar. 3 were pledged to the Count of Champagne. One of these was André de Montbard, the uncle of Saint Bernard. The Count donated the land on which Bernard built the Abbey of Clairvaux, which would be the center of Bernard's power. Fixing on the need to take back the Holy Lands from Islam, Bernard preached a military crusade. It was said that when he reached a village, women would attempt to hide their husbands, as few could resist his call to arms. The act of seeing the world may have appealed to a peasant class that was often regarded as the property of the feudal estates that dominated the countryside. The Crusades offered adventure and salvation. After thousands marched against Islam and recaptured the holy city of Jerusalem, thousands more desired to travel to the sacred city. The 9 original Templar Knights went to the Holy Lands to protect the roads for those making the pilgrimage. After several years, they returned to a hero's welcome. With Bernard's seal of approval, the Knights Templar grew and flourished, becoming the vanguard of Europe's military. Their military exploits against Islam are legendary. Their financial exploits are misunderstood and downplayed. Templar incorporated banking, although the full name of the organization was the Order of the Poor Knights of the Temple of Solomon. The order was anything but poor. It was, in fact, the richest organization that Europe had even seen, and the first ever multinational corporation. The business of the Knights Templar was business, and it was conducted in a way that Europe had never seen before. The loyalty of the order was directed to itself. The Templars nominally owed their allegiance to the Roman Pope, but this loyalty was more in word than in deed. They actually fought against piracy, a merry and a short life other Christian armies, and against their rival order, the Knights of St. John, and during the Albigensian Crusade some Templars even fought against the Pope and his genocidal purge of the Cathari in southern France. The Templars' true allegiance was to themselves, as together they could become masters of any industry they desired. Banking as we know it today was an institution founded by the Knights Templar. Before the Templars there were certain individuals who would attend trade fairs for facilitating currency exchange, buying and selling shares in commercial enterprises, and lending money. Many of the early banking groups were Italian families from Florence, Venice, and Lombardy. The activities of these bankers were restricted by numerous laws. In a world where the Pope and the Catholic Church made the rules, usury, the charging of interest, was banned. For the Templars there were several ways to skirt the laws forbidding the charging of interest. One way was simply to charge a commission to procure the loan, but such a thinly disguised fee would still attract the condemnation of religious members. Another way was to call usury by a different name. The order was allowed to charge a crusading interest for loans. Its clients were often the same nobility that donated lands to the temple, for which they received an income from the properties. Nobles, often the kings of England and France, needed to borrow money to fight wars, and the temple was willing to lend for a fee. Where usury was a practice not allowed even for the temple would earn a profit by currency changing. For instance, wool from France, that was carried on temple ships and sold to a buyer in England, was subject to a currency change that often placed less value on the payment currency. Deposit banking was not banned by the Church, nor was the function of acting as a safe deposit. Who was better prepared than the Templars, with their numerous fortresses and strongholds stretched over Europe,